me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie T aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2020 NFL Draft using our brand new grading scale from 5 to 1. Each pick will be assessed a score, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. We will then tally up all the scores for that team's draft, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating 2 things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Cincinnati, next, Cincy, Bengals, next. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Cincinnati Bengals. And I say this every year. I sound like a broken record, and they continue to prove me right, I feel like, each and every single year. There are certain teams that just get the draft. They know how to identify talented football players and bring them in. And I talk about Cincinnati as one of those teams every single year. Say what you want about their organization and how they're cheap. They spent some money this offseason on the cornerback position, but say what you want about Cincinnati and how they run their organization, and they're not a well-run franchise. Whatever the case may be, they draft well, though. They stay drafting talented football players. That is for damn sure. Jacksonville Jaguars, same can be said there. All right, they may not be a great organization, and they may not be run the best at all times. They just had to move on from Tom Coughlin because he was ruffling a lot of the players wrong. However, they draft talented football players in Jacksonville, okay? Seattle Seahawks, they have their own methods. I don't always agree with them, but they get guys that fit what they do. Same could be said for Baltimore. They probably do it the best of anyone. They get guys that fit what they want to do, but they're also happen to be talented, really talented football players. Dallas Cowboys, another team that drafts really well. But when you talk about Cincinnati, I don't know if there are many teams that draft better than the Bengals do. They are locked, stocked, and loaded with talent just about every single year. Now, how that talent plays and how far they can go is usually capped and bottlenecked by the quarterback position. And if Andy Dalton doesn't play well, they don't go very far. Now, it's a little bit different, okay? You looked at this organization and they had a slew of injuries and they were kind of going through this transitional period. No more Marvin Lewis. Everyone wanted him gone. And then they found out just how good they had it when he left because all of a sudden they can't win any ball games. We'll see what happens moving forward. And if Zach Taylor gets a breath of fresh air here with their newest selection in the first round, and if that jump starts this football team in the right direction, I can tell you this much. They've got talent, and it wouldn't shock me in the least if this team, if Joe Burrow is what we think he could be, right off the bat, right out of the gate, if it's AJ Green and all of these guys, if you start to see everything come together, if AJ Green's back to where he was prior to the injury as a true number 1 threat in this league, it puts everyone in their proper positions. Now you got Tyler Boyd out there as a number 3 option. T Higgins is a guy you drafted this year. Could easily slide right into a number 2 role instantly. If not, he could be a number 3 option for you, as Boyd would be your number 2. And then John Ross, could he finally put it together this year? And all of a sudden, you got all of this wealth and dearth of talent at the skill positions. You look at the tight end position, you're brewing up some things at tight end. We'll see how they all manifest themselves, but it's a lot of young, talented stuff at the tight end position for Cincinnati there. We all know about Joe Mixon and how talented he is. And some of the other guys I'm excited about at the running back position behind him. So this is a team really talented, guys. You look at the defensive side of the football. They were hurting in the secondary. They went out and addressed that. They went to the Minnesota Vikings store, picked up a couple of items there. And so you look at what they've assembled on that side of the football. They add a couple of pieces at the linebacker position. They were hurting there as well. And they really doubled down. They tripled down on the linebacker position in this draft. And they got some quality stuff off of that shelf. And all of a sudden you look up, and I wouldn't be shocked if this team was competing for a playoff spot late in December in the 2020 season. I'm just saying I feel really good about Cincinnati, and it's because they draft well. And they did it again. So let's get to the 2020 NFL Draft of the Cincinnati Bengals, shall we? And we start obviously in the first round. I've got all 7 selections made by the Bengals here in front of me. Got write-ups for every single one of those players as we'll break them down and give them scores. You can see each of their selections on the screen in front of you. We'll go through them one by one. We start in the first round, first overall selection, quarterback out of LSU. Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Joe Burrow is the pick. I'm not going to break Joe Burrow down. I've already done that extensively, did a film breakdown on the channel. So if you're looking for an extensive, thorough breakdown of Joe Burrow and what he brings to the table with film attached, go to the channel, Louie T Network, go and find the film breakdown. You can find it in the playlist that is the Draft Prospects 101 series for 2020. So already broke him down, but I can tell you this much. This guy is legit. He's the real deal. He was my number 1 quarterback on the board. He went number 1 overall. He was my number 2 player in this draft behind Chase Young. This guy is a stud. He won the Heisman Trophy for a reason. I think he's one of the best quarterback prospects we've seen come out of college in quite some time. And that's including Kyler Murray from a couple of years ago, who was absolutely dazzling as a prospect himself. I think Burrow kind of encompasses everything, gives you a little bit of size, something that Murray lacks, still gives you a little bit of athleticism. No, he's not the athlete that Kyler Murray was coming out of Oklahoma and is in the league right now, but he's more than capable of extending plays and making things happen. I think that's one of the things I love about Joe Burrow the most is his ability to make things happen off schedule, not afraid to throw the football up and give his receivers a chance in 50-50 situations. Well, you got 2 really good guys that can go up and get the football now in A.J. Green and now your next selection in T Higgins. And so Joe Burrow, you've done a good job of surrounding him with talented football players, and you can hand it off to Joe Mixon in the backfield. You can go play action fake. You've got speed. You've got size. You've got everything you need. A guy that can work the middle of the field, and Tyler Boyd as well. I think he's in a really good spot. I know a lot of people were dogging the Cincinnati Bengals and talking about how you don't want to go there if you're Joe Burrow. We'll see about that. I think they've done some quality things up front along the offensive line. And don't forget, it's essentially 2 first-round picks for the Cincinnati Bengals as they'll get Jonah Williams back along the offensive line at the left tackle position. So all of a sudden, you're getting this abundance of riches, the influx of talent, if you will, in Cincinnati all in one season. And I think Zach Taylor is actually a smart offensive mind, and I think he'll be able to put it all together when it's all said and done. But love the selection of Joe Burrow. You know how I feel about Joe Burrow. You already know what this is, but in case you don't, first round, first overall pick, quarterback out of LSU, Joe Burrow for me is, of course, a 5 for the Cincinnati Bengals. Much needed upgrade at the quarterback position. This team is, they could be a team to be reckoned with in this division. Not necessarily in year 1, but for years to come if Joe Burrow is what we think he could be. We move on to the next selection in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. Second round, 33rd overall selection, wide receiver out of Clemson. T Higgins is the selection. 6'4", 216 pounds, ran a 4.54 40 at the combine. 34-inch arms, so he is huge. He's massive. 59 grabs for 1,167 yards and 13 touchdowns in 15 games for the national championship runner-ups at Clemson in 2019. For his career, 135 grabs for 2,448 yards and 27 scores in 43 games for the Clemson Tigers. I had a late first round grade to an early second round grade on T Higgins. I thought he would be one of the guys that would slip to the second round. This is the perfect place for him to come off the board, to be honest with you. I did not think he was good enough to go in the first round. And we saw 6 receivers go in the first round, and I didn't think he would be one of them. Now, there were a couple of guys that I thought he should have went in front of that actually got drafted in front of him, like a Jalen Reagor, for instance. However, this is where I thought he was probably at his best in terms of value. He was my number 7 wide receiver. Guess where he was taken in this draft? The number 7 wide receiver. So there's a lot of value here in where you got T Higgins. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on, but strengths, size, obviously jumps right off the screen at you immediately. You're talking about a guy that's 6'4" with 34-inch arms. Let me repeat that for you one more time. 6'4" with 34-inch arms, which means his catch radius is through the roof. You can literally throw the football up to the sky and this guy can go and get it. Okay, so his length was the next pro, but I've coupled them together because that catch radius that he brings to the table is utterly ridiculous. That's one of the big pros of having a guy like T Higgins is you can just throw it up. You saw it at Clemson, his ability to go and get the football in 50-50 situations. Easy target for Trevor Lawrence to just throw the football up to. I think Joe Burrow is going to do much of the same. He did a lot of the same things with Jamar Chase and company at LSU. So this is the kind of guy that makes a ton of sense here in Cincinnati for the Bengals with Joe Burrow under center. Speed at 6'4", 4.54 is perfectly fine by me. That's plenty of speed at that size. A wise man once told me there are 3 ways to separate now. There's speed, there's quickness, and then there's size. He has a nice little combination of both size and speed. And so at 6'4", running a 4.54 is plenty fast for a guy with the measurables that T Higgins brings to the table. And we saw this guy running past a lot of defenders in the ACC. I get it. It's the ACC, and the ACC isn't what it used to be. I am totally aware of that. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about that a little bit later on in this particular breakdown. But that being said, he dominated the competition. And if they're not as good as they used to be, then prove it. Go out and dominate them. And that he did. Red zone target. The 13 touchdowns is the number that stands out from his 2019 campaign because the 59 grabs, that's cool. And that's a lot of yards per catch when you look at 59 grabs for over 1,100 yards. That's a lot of yards per catch. But the stunning number there is 13 touchdowns because you're talking about a guy that essentially every 5 catches was in the end zone. All right, that's a lot of touchdowns for not a lot of catches. So you're talking about a guy that is a problem in the red zone. And not all of these touchdowns that I'm speaking of came in the red zone, but he's a problem in the red zone, a guy you can throw it up to that can go and get the football, as I talked about with his size and his leaping ability and his length. But he's also a guy that can separate with speed and use his body as a shield and back shoulder fade and that kind of thing in the end zone. So there's a lot you can do with the T Higgins as you get into the red zone. Run after the catch. He's not a make-you-miss guy, but he is a guy that if you come with a feeble arm tackle attempt, he will run through that. He's physical with the football in his hands, and so he is a guy that will drag along defenders for the ride if they are willing to go and take that ride. Hands. He's got legit A1 hands. Is not a body catcher, catches the football with his hands, snatches it out of the air. So he's a guy that you can get it to in some tough situations. You need it on 3rd and 7. You need to move the sticks. You need to put the game away. You need to throw it to somebody to put the game away. T Higgins probably has the best set of hands on your team. Remember, A.J. Green, as much as I love A.J. Green, there was usually a few concentration drops A.J. Green was going to throw your way. Every single game. You know, you could count on A.J. Green to see one go through his hands or double catch 1 or 2. That's not a problem with T. Higgins. You know, he's got huge hands, snatches the ball out of the air. He's a guy you can trust with the football to catch it in traffic as well. Tremendous body control. For a guy his size, that was probably one of the more impressive feats and strengths that I saw from him was the way he was able to contort his body in midair to attack the football, get it at its highest point. And sometimes the ball would be very high or behind him in high, and he'd have to do a pirouette in the air, come down with the football, get his feet down in bounds. Number of times you saw this guy go in the air, find a way to get at least 1 foot down. You know, the college rule, just need to get 1 down in bounds. And he'd do some spectacular things to make sure that he was still in bounds. So his body control is also through the roof. And obviously he can high point the football. I've talked about that with his length and size. And so that's not something that you didn't already know, but I will reiterate that right now and hammer it home once more. He can go get the football. He's not one of these guys that waits for the football to come to him. He attacks it in the air at its highest peak. So he's going up and getting it. And again, at 6'4" with 34-inch arms, if you throw it up there, there aren't many corners in this league. I don't care if they're in his hip pocket or not. I don't think there are many guys that are going to be able to climb the ladder with T Higgins and stop him from coming down with the football. So his ability to go and get the football, to attack it in midair at its peak, in flight, is something else that is a massive, massive pro for T Higgins. And then his production, obviously, is something that you do not want to discount. You know, a lot of yards, bunch of touchdowns in 15 games this past year for the Clemson Tigers. You go to his weaknesses, level of competition. I'm not going to kill him for that. You know, he played in the ACC. It's a Power 5 conference. It's not his fault that the ACC is down right now, that Florida State isn't any good, Miami isn't any good, and all these teams are struggling. That's not his problem. All he can do is knock down the competition that they put in front of him, and that's what Clemson has done. That's what he did. But the level of competition was not NFL caliber, and so he did not see a bunch of NFL caliber corners while playing in the ACC, and he torched them, and that's what you're supposed to do, and he did that. Separation at the next level. That's a real question when you talk about T. Higgins. Is he going to be able to separate like he did in the ACC at the NFL level? When you watched him in the Ohio State game, and that's one that I put down in my notes, Jeffrey Okudah really stuck to him like white on rice. I mean, he didn't have a lot of airspace in that football game. And I actually feel like there was a point in that game where Okudah got in his head a little bit too, because Okudah was, very, very aggressive with him. He was also talking a little bit of trash. You could tell there was one play in particular where there's an incompletion on T. Higgins' side, attempt and a target to Higgins that's incomplete. And Okudah gets up, hands like this in his face, kind of walking and mocking him and walking away as if to say, I didn't even lay a hand on you this time. He might have been complaining to the referees about the physical play over there or something. I don't know. But it was not a very good performance for him versus Ohio State. But he then followed that up with a great performance versus LSU in the national championship game. And I feel like had he not gotten banged up in that game, maybe it's a different story. Maybe Clemson is able. And he came back in the game, but he wasn't the same guy nonetheless. I felt like he redeemed himself, played a really good game versus LSU. So can he separate at the next level? Jeffrey Okudah is an outlier. He's an elite corner, not just at the collegiate game, but even at the NFL level. He's got elite talent, an elite skill set. You're not going to see corners on a weekly basis that look like Jeffrey Okudah. Can he separate consistently at the NFL level? That's a real question for T. Higgins. And even if he can't separate with speed and quickness, he can separate with size. So there's always that to fall back on. But I want to know, can he separate with something other than his size? We'll see. And does he have true deep speed? Does he have deep threat ability? Can he take the top off the defense consistently at the NFL level? I think he'll be able to run past some corners, not all of them, but I do think he will be in a position that some guys will underestimate his ability to run. And next thing you know, he'll have a step or two on top of them. They'll fall asleep behind the wheel, and he'll beat them deep. But it doesn't really matter whether he can get behind them or not. If it's one-on-one and I'm Joe Burrow, I'm taking my shot because I got a 6'4" receiver with 34-inch arms that will go up and attack the football, and I like my chances. So I comp him to Alshon Jeffrey. He looks so much like Alshon. And don't think about the Alshon Jeffrey that barely can move now in Philadelphia. I'm talking about the Alshon Jeffrey that came in the league out of South Carolina to the Chicago Bears that was tearing things up early in his career. That's the guy he reminds me of, is an Alshon Jeffrey, a guy that could run a bit, a guy that could make some plays at the highest peak, go and get the football, and just big, strong hands, physical with little corners. See a lot of that in T. Higgins, and I think he reminds me a lot of Alshon Jeffrey. Never, ever trust a man with two first names. That being said, second round, 33rd overall selection, wide receiver out of Clemson. T. Higgins for me is another 5. This is a perfect pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. They did it perfectly here. You get the quarterback. You already got a left tackle that he's going to get essentially as another first-round pick in Jonah Williams. Now you get him a weapon to get the football to, who knows how much longer you're going to have AJ Green for, whether it's just this year or maybe AJ Green is back this year and you guys have a serious run and now he wants to be a part of it, because I thought there was a little moment there where AJ Green was saying to himself, I want a chance to win. I want to be a part of a winner and have an opportunity to go somewhere where I can win. And maybe if you show him that you're changing the course of this program and you're going in a different direction and you're going to start winning ball games, and now you got a quarterback that can take you where you want to go. Maybe AJ Green wants to be a part of this thing for the rest of his career. And now all of a sudden you got this wealth at the receiver position of guys like Higgins, Green, and as I mentioned, you just signed Tyler Boyd to an extension last year. So you could have a trio of receivers, and who knows what John Ross is going to be. But at the end of the day, even without Ross, you got a hell of a trio of receivers just with those guys. If Ross can prove that he isn't a bust and just stay healthy, because we saw flashes from Ross at the beginning of last season. Those first 3 games or so, when he was healthy, he was electrifying. If you can get that back from him, all of a sudden now, sky's the limit for this Bengals offense with Joe Burrow pulling the trigger. As we get to the next selection in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals, 3rd round, linebacker out of Wyoming, Logan Wilson is the pick, 65th pick overall by the Cincinnati Bengals, 6'2", 241 pounds, ran a 4.63 40, 8.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 7 pass breakups, and 4 INTs in 2019 for the Wyoming Cowboy. In his career, 35 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 14 pass breakups, and 10 INTs. This guy gets busy out on the football field. I had a 2nd or 3rd round grade on him, anywhere in there from the 2nd to the 3rd. I was very comfortable with him coming off the board. He's a very impressive backer. Not a lot of people were talking about this guy during the process, and I absolutely do not know why, but you got a steal here in the 3rd round, to be honest with you, because I thought he was good enough to come off the board in the 2nd round. I had him as my 5th linebacker in this draft. You get him at number 7 in this draft. So again, felt like you got tremendous value here in the 3rd round with Logan Wilson. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on. But strengths, good angular frame. He's a long linebacker. And you know what? I was listening to a podcast, Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. And Daniel Jeremiah brought up a really good point that we don't talk about enough with linebackers that can drop into coverage. And that's guys with size, because a lot of times these linebackers are 6 feet, they're 5'11". They're not very tall, they're not very big. And so it makes it easier for quarterbacks to throw over the top of these guys over the middle of the field. You just need to put a little bit of touch to get it over that guy who's not very tall, and it makes it a lot easier for that quarterback to just put a little bit on it, a little bit of arc on the football, on that seam ball to that tight end, or a nice little arc on a dig route or so, and get it to one of his receivers. It makes it a lot tougher when that linebacker over the middle of the field that's dropping into coverage is 6'2" or 6'3", That's part of the reason Brian Urlacher was a problem in the middle of the football field. He was so damn tall. That's part of the reason Leighton Vander Esch is a real problem in the middle of the field. Those types of guys pick passes off, not only because they're smart defenders with ball skills, mind you, but they're also really tall, and quarterbacks aren't used to having to put extra arc on the football to get it over those guys. They think that, I've done this a million times. I've gotten the football. This should be enough. And that guy leaps up because he's 6'3", and snatches the football out of the air. Logan Wilson is another one of those types of linebackers with a good angular frame at 6'2". With that length, he's able to get his hands on the football. So do not discount the fact that he's 6'2". That also gives him an advantage dropping into coverage. He's got really good speed for his size. This is a 240-pound linebacker at 6'2", running a 4.63, and I think he even plays a little bit faster than that 4.63, to be honest with you. When you watch him on tape, he gets to the football in a hurry. So he's got quality speed for his size. Very sound tackler. When he gets to the football, 9 times out of 10, he's got that guy on the ground. He's got a very high hit rate in terms of getting ball carriers on to the ground. Rare coverage instincts for a linebacker. He's He's really, really instinctual, man. He understands what quarterbacks and offenses are trying to do. You can tell this is a guy that probably lives in the film study room because he understands what teams are trying to do. And he's not buying the bait. He's not buying the and biting off on the eye candy of, oh, you got a little guy, you got a running back, sitting down over the ball on 3rd and 9. I'm not going to suck up to that because you're trying to run a guy behind me. And then you can try if you want to fit that football in behind me, but I'm going to make you pay for it. You best take this check down. I'm going to rally up, make the tackle, and now you got to punt. He's a very, very smart football player, understands zone coverage, how to pattern match. Okay, I have this patch of grass. Yes, that is true. But if this guy runs into my zone, I'm not just going to keep guarding this patch of grass. I'm now going to match this guy until he is out of my zone. And so just a really smart and instinctual linebacker in coverage. Outstanding ball skills. The man picked off 10 passes while at Wyoming. And you can tell he was an high school wide receiver and corner. And so you see those skills translate when you talk about his ball skills. That's why his hands are so soft. And that's why the ball is so easily caught by him, is because he's got the experience and the background of being an ex-defensive back and wide receiver. So naturally, he knows how to attack the football in the air. And you see it on tape, and the numbers bear that out. Plays under control at all times. When you see a guy with this much production, generally, that's a guy that's flying all around the field. Like a Kenneth Murray, who went in the first round to the Chargers out of Oklahoma. This guy's flying all around the field. I mean, he's a blur. He's grabbing people by their neck and slinging them down. When you watch Patrick Queen, same thing out of LSU, flying around the field, lighting guys up. That's not Logan Wilson, man. He's controlled. He's composed. He's controlled. He's poised. He's not running around the field like a chicken with his head cut off, or he's not running around the field like his hair's on fire. He's calculated. He's very precise in his movements, and he doesn't waste any of his movements. And when he sees it, he goes and he strikes. Diagnosis, plays well and rallies to the football. Again, another one of these guys that just knows how to get to the football. Sees it, reacts, and sometimes predicts what's happening and gets there before it actually happens. And so just, again, another one of these guys that does a lot of quality things that it's hard to teach. Gets depth in his zone drops and can handle some man responsibility. I wouldn't necessarily put him in a ton of man situations. That's just me. I wouldn't do that if I were you, but he can handle it. If you got a tight end that's a little slow of foot, he can guard that guy. You get an athletic tight end, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that because he's not the guy to flip his hips, turn and run and plant and drive and those sort of things. But I love him in zone coverage. Absolutely love this guy as a zone dropping defender. Weaknesses. Can sometimes play too methodical. I talked about this guy being calculated in his movements and that he doesn't just react to the first thing that he sees, but sometimes he's too methodical and he does allow that pulling guard to climb up to the second level to come and get him. He will allow that guard to come or that center to come off of that double team and that combo block and reach him at the second level. He will allow sometimes for things to develop in front of him that he may have been able to get to a little bit sooner, but because he's so methodical, sometimes these things happen. And so you got to take the good with the bad. That's something that he does. Sometimes he's a little too patient. All right. Inconsistent coming downhill as a thumper. Again, this is where that patience kind of comes into play. You'd like him sometimes to be a little bit more aggressive. Don't wait for that pulling guard to get 4 yards through that gap into the second level. Meet him in that B gap and destroy him, or at least contact him and stuff that gap up so that running back can't come through right behind him. You'd like to see him come down a little bit more aggressively, taking on some of these blocks. And sometimes that's just not what he's doing. He's just not thinking about it that way. And so you'd like to see him be a little bit more consistent coming down, taking on blockers and being a thumper, but it's just not who he is, really, to be honest with you. Will his coverage ability translate, especially man, and covering over routes and seams? That's just a question of his foot speed. Can you trust this guy to run with some of the more athletically gifted tight ends in this league over the middle of the football field, on an over route, on a seam ball? Can you trust this guy in man coverage? I told you I don't necessarily think that's something I would do on a consistent basis. There are other linebackers that you have on your football team that should be able to handle that duty for you in terms of man coverage. But I would love this guy in zone coverage. And we'll see. We'll see if he's able to handle those responsibilities, running with the guy 15, 20 yards down the field on a seam ball. Can he get his head around and locate the football? Running with the guy on play action fake on an over route, starting on this side of the formation and running all the way across the field 30 yards on an over route. Can he run with that guy and stay with him and find the football? We will see. But I absolutely love this selection for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's what they do in the draft. It's why I feel like they just continue to get talented football players year in and year out. This is what they do best. I talked about Leighton Vander Esch. He's a watered-down version of Leighton Vander Esch. And what's a watered-down version of Leighton Vander Esch? Sean Lee, who is my comp for Logan Wilson. He's Sean Lee, super smart, instinctual, can find the football. Unlike Sean Lee, you want this guy to stay healthy. That's the reason Sean Lee isn't considered one of the best linebackers over the last decade, is because he couldn't stay healthy. But if he could stay healthy, Sean Lee had everything you were looking for. And I see all of those traits in Logan Wilson. He's not Leighton Vander Esch, even though he has, a lot of the same attributes, because Leighton Vander Esch was a tremendous athlete as well in terms of his speed. But Sean Lee, he's right in that Sean Lee neighborhood, and I see a lot of those same characteristics here in the third round, 65th pick overall. Linebacker out of Wyoming, Logan Wilson for me is a 4, man. This is a tremendous pickup for the Bengals at a position of need. And it was so much of a position of need, they decided to double down on it on back-to-back selections as we go to the fourth round now. 107th pick overall. Linebacker out of App State, Hakeem Davis-Gaither is the selection. 6'1", 224 pounds. On the Bengals website, this guy's listed at 215. I wouldn't be shocked if he's about 215. I mean, he's a very slender guy, but he's a tremendous athlete, and he plays the game with reckless abandon, which is what you love at the linebacker position. 14 and a half tackles for loss, 5 sacks, no forced fumbles, 8 pass breakups, 1 INT, and a blocked kick in 14 games in 2019 for App State. You look at his career stats: 28 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 17 pass breakups, that 1 interception, and that same blocked kick in 53 games. I had a third round grade on Hakeem Davis-Gaither, so you get him a round after that. So again, I'm thinking this is tremendous value. I had him as my 6th rated linebacker in this draft. Despite his size, he was the 11th linebacker taken. So again, tremendous value on the part of the Cincinnati Bengals. Strengths: fluidity and his movement are just off the charts. I mean, this guy's so comfortable out in space, moving, flipping his hips, dropping into coverage, man-to-man coverage. You name it, I think he can do a little bit of everything at the linebacker position. So fluidity, movement-wise, is off the charts. Ability to slip blocks and get into the backfield. He can turn skinny and slither into the backfield. And I'm watching him against South Carolina. There's a critical third down late in that ball game. He's able to get in the backfield, make the tackle for a loss, and force them to make a tough decision on fourth down. I think they ultimately went for it and did not get it. Hakeem Davis-Gaither was in on that stop as well. This guy's phenomenal at getting into the backfield. And the tackles for loss throughout his career, and even in 2019, kind of speak to that, because only 5 of his 14 and a half tackles for loss were sacks. So 9 of those and a half of those were tackles for loss on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So in the run game. So that just tells you all you need to know either that or him in the flats tackling a guy catching a football on a swing screen or something like that. So his ability to get into the backfield is uncanny. Versatility. Also a quality rusher off the edge. You can do some things with this guy. I talked about you dropping him over the slot, him running with tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. This is also a guy you can blitz as a backer, but then also say on third down, okay, hey, line up outside of the tackle and rush as a rush end. And so he can come off the edge as an edge rusher. There's so many things you can do with this guy. And I think there's a little bit of talent there from Hakeem Davis-Gaither as an edge rusher, man. There's something there. There's a little juice off the edge from him there as well. High energy motor guy. I mean, he's one of those guys flying around the football field, sideline to sideline speed. He can run. Didn't test at the combine, was nursing a foot injury, but this is a guy that easily is a 4-5 type of linebacker. He's right up there in the mix with the Kenneth Murrays and Patrick Queens of this draft who went in the first round, who are guys right around 4-5 flat. He's right in that neighborhood, 4.52. I put him down in my notes anywhere from 4.52 to 4.56. That's the kind of athlete you're getting here in Hakeem Davis-Gaither. Uncanny ability to drop shoulder and duck underneath blocks to secure tackles. I don't always love when he does this because he's so close to the ground. He's literally flirting with, finding the ground and not finding the ball carrier, but finding a face full of dirt instead. But he gets so low, he ducks under the block of that tackle, guard, tight end, whomever. They can't bend at that ridiculous angle. He's got that Gumby shapeshifter type of bending ability where he's almost parallel to the ground when he ducks under that guy and he knifes in, shoots the cuffs. He's an ankle biter at that point and does a tremendous job. I don't see anybody else doing that. I don't always love it, as I mentioned, because he could easily miss. He could easily be pushed down to the ground and out of the play, but a lot more times than not, he's making that tackle, and it's crazy to see him be able to do that. Explosiveness off the edge with a nice stutter and crossover, as I talked about, the versatility to rush the quarterback on third downs. There's a little bit of juice here, folks. There's a little something here off the edge, and that's part of the versatility that you get with the package of Hakeem Davis-Gaither, and he's got a little something. I can beat you with the rush up the field, bend the corner, bend, dip, and rip, or I can give you this nice little stutter, then you open up your hips thinking I'm about to give you this speed, and then I cross over, and I'll go inside, and now you can't stop me. And I told you he's got that uncanny ability to slither. Then he turns skinny. That tackle tries to get a piece of him. Now he's on the way to the quarterback. So there's a little bit extra here that comes with this package that you're getting in Hakeem Davis-Gaither. Impacts the game in a multitude of ways. Pass breakups, tackles for loss, forced fumbles, sacks, etc. This is a guy that filled up the stat sheet, man. 17 pass breakups. Not all of them are what you think of when you think of pass breakups. Oh, he dropped in the coverage and not the football. No, he's rushing the quarterback and he's getting his hands up. And I love that. I always ridicule and just blast defensive linemen, especially the interior ones, who don't get their hands up. You got guys that are 6'3", 6'4", with 34-inch arms, and they got 0 pass breakups. How is that possible? You're not getting to the quarterback that often. Get your hands up. This is one of those guys, you don't have to tell him that. He's in pursuit of the quarterback. It's a bootleg. He's a free rusher off the edge. And he may have taken a couple of false steps. Now he's in hot pursuit of that quarterback. Quarterback's trying to throw the football. Hands up, ball batted down. I watched him in that South Carolina game. He had to have at least 3 or 4 PBUs in that game alone. So this is a guy that can impact the game in a multitude of ways. Weaknesses. He's the classic tweener. If you've ever seen one, this is the definition. If there was a definition for a tweener in Webster's, there'd be a picture of Hakeem Davis-Gaither. Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? He looks like a safety, but he's playing a linebacker position. Really, what is he? He's a tweener, man. I mean, he's got an edge rusher skill set in a safety's body, and he's playing linebacker. Okay, so the Bengals are going to have to figure it out. I think I know what they're going to do with him. In today's NFL, You just want your best athletes on the field. It's no longer this game where you got to have 245, 50-pound thumpers at linebacker. You need athletes on the field because of the way the game is shifting with all the speed that the offense is putting on the field. You're going to put this guy at linebacker and you're going to turn him loose. But he's a tweener, folks. No doubt about that. Needs to find other ways than slipping or ducking to take on blocks and make a play. I talked about his uncanny ability to duck and slip blocks, but you're not going to always win that way. And he's a 220-pound linebacker. So, I mean, if a lineman gets their hands on him, usually it's curtains. It's lights out for him. So he's going to have to find a way to use his arms, his hands. There's got to be another way where he's going to be able to take on a blocker and shed that guy, keep him at bay, and then get to the ball carrier. It can't always be slipping or ducking blocks because you're going to end up running yourself out of the play and allowing big plays to happen that way. Needs to be more disciplined on the backside of plays. I talked about those false steps on a bootleg to his side, and he's the unblocked defender. He's the guy that will bite the eye candy from time to time. He sees run fake, and he's biting down on that running back, and all of a sudden the quarterback comes out on the other side with that thing, and he's nowhere to be found. Fake screen one way, throw the screen the other way. He's all over the fake screen on that first pump fake. He's a guy that has to sometimes slow down. I talked about this guy having a high motor and playing with that crazy energy. Sometimes you can use that against guys like that and work it against them. And he's one of those guys that just needs to settle down just a tad bit. But I'm never one to reel a guy in. A wise man once told me, I'd much rather calm down a crazy man than have to revive a corpse. And so you don't have to worry about that with him. He's going to be running all over the field. And so love this selection. My comp for him is Telvin Smith. He looks like a Telvin Smith clone coming out of Florida State. And we know how successful he has been in this league before his retirement, his premature retirement in Jacksonville. He was a stud, and I see a lot of those same traits and characteristics here in Hakeem Davis-Gaither. So in the fourth round, 107th overall selection, linebacker out of App State, Hakeem Davis-Gaither for me is a 4. Love this selection. Love the fact that you doubled down in consecutive rounds, consecutive picks at a position of need with two guys that are going to be instant impact players for you in the upcoming season. As you get to the next selection in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals, 5th round, 147th overall selection, edge rusher out of Notre Dame, Khalid Kareem is the pick. 6'4", 268 pounds, 34-inch arms. Wasn't able to perform and put a 40 time on the table for us as he was nursing a torn labrum that he played the entire 2019 season essentially with and through. So this is a guy with some toughness. There was always the running joke at Notre Dame that Khalid Kareem was always the guy that would get injured. They'd have to stop the game 3 or 4 times for him. I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. So he was a guy that would always get hurt. And he'd always come off the field and he'd always come back. And so you'd always think, okay, you're hurt again, really, dude? Seriously? Because he'd always come back. But he was legitimately hurt. He'd sprain his ankle or something like that and go get it taped up and test it out. And then he'd come back in the game and he'd play fine. So that was the running joke at Notre Dame. But this is a guy that is tough for sure. We'll talk about that here in a second. But 10 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 pass breakup in 13 games in 2019 for Khalid Kareem. 26.5 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 8 pass breakups in 42 games for his career for the Fighting Irish. I had a 5th or 6th round grade on Khalid Kareem, and so that's right around where I thought he would come off the board. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on, but strengths, great size and length for a base 4'3" defensive end. If he didn't put on another pound, he'd be perfectly fine at the weight that he's at and size that he's at right now. 6'4", 268. That's right around the going rate for an NFL caliber base 4'3" defensive end. I mean, Chase Young is 6'5", 265, 264. I mean, that's right around what you're looking for. And he may ultimately get to 270, 273, 275. But if he weren't to gain another pound, he's perfectly fine at his size and in his length. at 34-inch arms, ridiculous. It's what you're looking for out there on the edge. Outstanding strength at the point of attack, and a lot of that comes from his length, his ability to use his arms to extend, lock him out, and be able to gain the leverage advantage versus the tackle in front of him, stand him up, and be able to keep him at bay. So he's got an outstanding strength at the point of attack, and at times he's able to convert that length into power in the form of a mean bull rush that will also get him to the quarterback as well. Ridiculous strides, eat up grass quickly. He's not a twitchy edge rusher. If you're looking for a guy that's going to come off the edge with quickness and blazing speed, you got the wrong guy here. But what he does do is he eats up a ton of space with huge strides. So if he's able to gain the edge on a tackle, you can pretty much wrap it up, because he's going to turn the corner and get to the quarterback quickly because of his ability to take those huge strides and eat up so much real estate. Uses his length to his advantage. He's got a little bit of a latch and snatch. I'd actually like to see that a little bit more. I don't think he uses it enough, but it is something that is in his arsenal. And then he's got a bull rush with that length as well. So his arm length is something that I think he needs to focus in on as his main source of domination at the NFL level, because that's what's going to win for him. He's not a twitchy athlete. He's not going to win with speed and quickness. He's going to have to win with length. So I'd like to see him really hone in on how to use his length to his advantage, more so than he already does. Plays with patience and knows where the football is at all times. To me, his best attribute isn't his ability to go after quarterbacks. It's his dominance in the run game. He's a really good run defender. And, there are a lot of times where guys are so worried about getting to the quarterback that they don't even know where the ball is. And we've all heard the old adage a bunch of times. And we want our guys to play the run on the way to the quarterback. And some guys take that to heart, where they're not even worried about where the ball is. They're just trying to get to the quarterback. And if that means they're turning their back to the quarterback and the running back, and they're trying to spin and this crazy aggressive swim move, but in the process of doing that, they lose sight of where the ball is, they're all about it. And then when they finally break through and they realize the running back's got the ball and he's 7 yards up the field, they feel really foolish, but they don't care. He's not one of those guys. He knows exactly where the ball carrier is. He knows who has the football. If they're running a jet sweep, he's aware of that. If they're running a reverse, he's aware of that too. He knows where the ball is at all times. Will create fumbles and pass breakups. I absolutely love the fact that this guy has 34-inch arms and he's knocking down passes, and you see it on a regular basis when you watch him on tape. And I had the pleasure of watching his entire career, and I know fully well that this is a guy that gets his hands up and will deflect a passer too. And so 8 pass breakups in his career tells you that this guy gets his hands on the football. 4 career forced fumbles means when he gets to the quarterback, he's looking to jar that football free. So these are all things that you're looking for from your edge rushers, and he brings those things to the table. And as I mentioned, toughness. This is a guy that played through a torn labrum in 2019. This is a guy that constantly was nicked up, ankle and knee and all kinds of stuff, and just continued to play through it while at Notre Dame. You could count on Khalid Kareem, even though I don't trust him because he's got 2 first names. You could always count on this guy to be available for you. He was accountable, available each and every single week for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish for the most part. Weaknesses. Extremely leggy and non-explosive. I talked about that ability to eat up grass with his strides, but in that same vein, he's very leggy. He doesn't have a lot of quickness. Short area quickness is non-existent essentially, and so he's not explosive off the edge. He's not a guy that's going to win with quickness and all the things that really enamor people at the NFL level with edge rushers. That's not who Khalid Kareem is. He's going to win with length and craftiness and pure strength and bull rushing ability if he's able to get to the quarterback. Very bland menu of rush moves. Khalid Kareem is one of those guys that You go to his store, his restaurant of rush items, and you look on the menu and you're like, not really a lot here. And so you can pretty much digest everything he's got in one trip to his store. And you're like, oh, okay, Bull Rush. I'll have a Bull Rush, and I'll have a Bull Rush and a Bull Rush. And I think I'll wash that down with a little bit of a latch and snatch. Thanks. And now I don't have to come back to your restaurant. I've had your whole menu. He needs more. All right. I need to see more from him. Learn how to use your hands. All right. Learn how to use a secondary spin. Okay. So the Bull Rush didn't work initially. Secondary spin. I'm going to spin off of that. And now I'm inside, and maybe I'll fall into a sack or two. But you don't really see that from him. So I need him to expand his menu of rush moves a bit. Right now, it's very bland. We'll have to create ways to get to the quarterback. They did it at Notre Dame. A lot of twists and stunts for Khalid Kareem on the defensive line. He wasn't a guy that could win a lot of times by himself. So they created ways by twists and stunts and blitzes and things of that nature. And that's what you're probably going to have to do for him at the NFL level. He does a really quality job on those stunts of being patient and then looping over. And I told you he closes the distance very quickly, but those aren't very electric either. But he seems to get there on a consistent basis when twisting and stunting. So my comp for him is Deshaun Hall, the ex-Texas A&M product who played opposite of the number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett, who was drafted by the Carolina Panthers some 4 years ago, I believe, and has bounced around the league since. Talented guy, but not electric, not dynamic as an edge rusher, and never has made his mark in this league as an edge rusher. I could see the same thing happening to Khalid Kareem. I hope I'm wrong. Again, I don't trust him. He's got 2 first names, but in the 5th round, 147th selection overall, edge rusher out of Notre Dame. Khalid Kareem for me is a 3 as we move on to the next selection in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. 6th round, 180th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Kansas, Hakeem Adeniji is the pick. 6'4", 302 pounds, 34-inch arms. 12 games, 12 starts at left tackle for the Jayhawks in 2019 for his career. 48 games, 48 starts. 41 of them coming at left tackle, the other 7 coming at the right tackle position. So right off the bat, he gives you swing tackle ability. But if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm kicking this guy inside to guard. And I'll tell you why during this breakdown. But they have him listed as a guard. I think that's what he's ultimately going to play for them. But in a pinch, if you run out of options, this is a guy with tackle experience. I had a 6th or 7th round grade on Hakeem Adeniji, and that's where you took him. So again, good value there. Better movement skills than I expected getting to the 2nd level and out to the perimeter. I was expecting him to be a bit of a stiff. He moved a little bit better, and trust me, he has his issues with his movements at times, but getting to the 2nd level and getting out to the perimeter, I was actually impressed. Very, very impressed, in fact. Nice choppy steps in wide base and pass sets, which enhances his balance. Again, you can tell this guy was coached up really well because he takes those nice choppy steps in his pass sets, keeping his feet shoulder width apart, which gives him that nice, solid, firm, sturdy base. And it gives him that balance that you need to be able to endure a bull rush and not get off balance. Can generate a little bit of movement in the run game. Even as a base blocker, you see him moving some guys, which is why, you feel like the move to guard will be better suited for him because he can move some guys against their will a bit in the run game. Toughness and durability. This is a guy that started all 4 years at Kansas. And every year, every game, this guy didn't miss a game. Even had an injury, had a shoulder surgery on both of his labrums after the 2017 season. So he was banged up, played every single game the following season thereafter, didn't miss a single snap. So this is a guy that is tough, has some durability, and that's something else you like to hear. Possible versatility, guard or center. He's actually taken snaps at center in practice for the Jayhawks. So there is this potential for him to maybe kick all the way inside the center if need be. You've already got a center that you spent an early round draft pick on. So the guard is probably more likely than not his position. But guess what? The more you can do, the better. The more versatility you have, the better chance you have of making an NFL roster. So if he can play all three interior offensive line positions, that will serve him better at the next level. Weaknesses. Hand placement and footwork are inconsistent. Man, are they all over the place or what? My goodness, his hands are up around the neck. They're behind the shoulder pads. They're up around the nameplate. I mean, his hands are all over the place. His footwork is all over the place. It's what gets him into trouble the most. Speaking of which, once he's knocked off balance, he can't stop the bleeding. There was one bull rush I saw where he got knocked off balance because his footwork was all over the place. And so he was off balance, and the guy jacks him up, and he's trying his hardest to anchor down and stop the bleeding. He just can't, man. He is fumbling, stumbling all over the place, and ultimately ended up on his ass on that particular play. So he's a guy that you don't want to see get off balance because right now he's not able to stop the bleeding. Lacks foot quickness to prevent early access to the edge, and then compounds that by lacking the recovery tools to clean up the mess. So this is why he can't play tackle right here. This particular reason right here is that he lacks the foot quickness necessary to just keep guys in front of him. The simple exercise of mirroring a guy. Just mirroring the guy in front of you. Whatever he does, you shadow him and don't let him pass you. He can't do that. Too many times, guys were able to beat him around the edge, and you'd think with the 34-inch arms that he'd be able to get back into the play and push that guy around the pocket and allow the quarterback to step up. And that just wasn't the case very often. Those guys were able to beat him, flatten to the quarterback, and get to the quarterback. And so he's not a guy that can clean up his mess and recover and still save the rep. Once he's beaten, he's beaten. And lastly, he allows guys into his frame way too often. Those 34-inch arms aren't really coming into play because guys are getting into his chest. His hands are back here and he's trying to fend them off, and he's not strong enough to bench press guys off of him. So once guys get him in this defenseless position, he can't fend them off, and all of a sudden they're in his chest and he's in trouble. And so he's got to learn how to keep guys at bay. Stiff jab, keep them off of you. He just doesn't have that ability right now. And so, again, he's got to kick inside to guard. But nonetheless, there's some workable traits here in the 6th round, 180th overall selection. Offensive lineman out of Kansas. Hakeem Adeniji, for me, is a 3. As we move on to the final pick in this draft for the Cincinnati Bengals, 7th round, 215th pick overall, linebacker out of Purdue, Marcus Bailey is the pick. 6 feet, 235, 31.5-inch arms, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 0 pass, no forced fumbles, no pass breakups in 4 games in 2019. Hence the 4 games. Okay, we'll come back to that. For his career, 28 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 6 pass breakups, 6 INTs, and a pick 6 in 42 games. I'll give you my comp for him a little bit later on. Strengths, this guy's a tackling machine. I wrote down in my notes, if he gets there, he's getting the guy on the ground. All right. The real question for him is he going to get there? All right. He isn't the fastest guy. We'll talk about that here in a second. But if he gets there, he's going to make the tackle. Period. End of discussion. Excuse me. There's no debating it. If he gets there, the tackle will be made. Okay? He's a tackling machine. It's like he's got a magnet on him or something. High football IQ. He just gets it, man. All right. And he has to, because he's not the fleetest of foot. and he's not the most athletically gifted. And because of that, he's got to be smart, and he is. He gets it. He understands where he needs to be, when he needs to be there, how he needs to get there, what route he needs to take. All of these things kind of combined into one. He's great in coverage, hence the 6 interceptions. He just understands what he has to do. Impacts the game in various ways. I mean, I gave you all of these ridiculous numbers. I mean, the 28 tackles for loss, 13 sacks. That's a great number there. 2 forced fumbles, 6 pass breakups, 6 INTs. So even for a guy that's not the fastest at the linebacker position, still impacting the game on all 3 downs. Despite the lack of athleticism, uses keys and quick diagnosis to make himself potentially available on all 3 downs. That's going to be for the Bengals to determine whether this is a guy that can help you on all 3 downs or not. Maybe he's only a first and second down linebacker, but the numbers and the production suggest that he deserves at least an opportunity to prove that he can't do it before you just say that he can't. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but you don't have to be. Vontaze Burfict wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but he knew where to be. And so if you've got a guy like that, you may have something here. And he's definitely that kind of football player. Uses nice quick chuck to free himself from blockers and make tackles. That's the reason why if he gets there, he's making a tackle. Because when he takes on blockers, he doesn't stay blocked. He's a guy that uses his arms, quick punch, 2-hand chuck, bow, 1-hand punch, jab, bow, get off me, to keep himself free and then latch on to that ball carrier and make the tackle. Rarely do you see Marcus Bailey get to the ball carrier but stay engaged with a blocker and not make the play. It just rarely happens because he knows how to keep himself free. Weaknesses: lacks explosion and dynamic athletic ability. When you watch him on tape, it's not eye-popping. It's not the kind of athleticism that gets you excited, but he does have the kind of instincts that get you excited. But he does not have the athleticism. All right, you will not mistake him for Hakeem Davis-Gaither, that's for sure. Although he sees it sometimes, his athletic limitations prevent him from getting there in both the run and the pass. There are a couple of times on tape where I was watching him. I watched him in 2018 versus Nebraska, and it was a great example of this. He sees it. It's a run to the outside. He sees it. He keys it. It's on the opposite side away from him, and he's trying his hardest to get out there, but he just can't get there. He's not fast enough. That back was able to turn the corner, get up the field before Marcus Bailey was even able to get in the general vicinity. And then I thought the play that really illustrated this the best was Nebraska had a tight end, not very fast. He wasn't a great athlete, and he's running a seam ball, and Marcus Bailey sees it. He sniffs it out, and he turns to run with this tight end up the seam, but he can't keep up. He sees it. He sees what's happening. He's identified it. But he's not athletic enough to run with this guy. And so the quarterback hits that tight end for about a 22-yard gain up the seam. And Bailey knew what was coming. He saw it, and he was right there, but he couldn't get there to make a play because he just wasn't athletic enough. And so sometimes his athletic limitations limit him from being able to get to the football, even though he sees it. But the biggest reason why this guy was even here, you got guys like Mel Kiper Jr. saying that this guy is a second-round talent that you're getting in the 7th round. There are a lot of people that believe in Marcus Bailey as a linebacker. I didn't have a draftable grade on him because of what I'm about to tell you. But, had he not had the injuries, this guy's no worse than a 4th-round pick. At worst. Probably more of a day 2 pick, 2nd or 3rd round linebacker. But this guy he got major injury concerns. A significant knee injury shortened his 2019 season to just 4 games. All right. So when you hear that, because in college, they don't have to disclose what actually took place. They can just tell you, oh, he hurt his knee and that's it. When you hear a significant injury, generally it's either a torn ACL. When you talk about a knee, it's usually an ACL or an Achilles. I usually just go with the standard, oh, he tore his ACL, more likely than not. So that happened in 19, but then in 2015, he tore his ACL 3 games into his true freshman season. And so that was back in 2015. So you've got on record 2 major knee injuries to a player that already is lacking in true athleticism to begin with. So that's the real concern here, is what does Marcus Bailey look like post ACL tear for the second time in his career? I comp him to Mason Foster, high IQ linebacker that just doesn't have the athleticism to always get there, but he'll be around. And so these are the types of guys you take a chance on in the 7th round. This is why the Bengals get it. I've always said there are 3 types of players that you take in the 7th round. You take guys with character issues, red flags because of some issues maybe off the field or in the locker room with teammates, but very talented. You take guys with medical red flags. That's what Marcus Bailey has here. Or you take guys that played at a small school or have limited experience, but they're very talented. Maybe they made a positional switch, don't have a ton of experience, but you see the value in that guy. If you can coach him up, there could be something here. You took the second of those 3 options. Medical, red flags, all over the place on Marcus Bailey, but the talent is definitely here. In the 7th round, 215th overall selection, linebacker out of Purdue, Marcus Bailey, for me, is a 3 to wrap up the Cincinnati Bengals draft. They did it again. Another tremendous draft for the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know who runs their draft room, but every year they get it right. And they did it again this year. Love this draft. Love the fact that you knew you needed a pass catcher early, attacked that need, got it out of the way. Knew you needed linebacker help. You didn't go after it not once, but twice, but 3 times in this draft. And you came away with 3 quality linebackers if Marcus Bailey can stay healthy. You did the same thing, remember, at the running back position. And I loved that pickup last year of the Oklahoma running back that had all the injury issues, but uber talented Rodney Anderson. This is what you do in the later rounds. The Bengals get that. This is why they win the draft every year. Now they need to start winning football games. All right, and I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later if these picks all pan out. What this all amounts to for the Cincinnati Bengals, a 3.86, one of the higher grades given out thus far in the 2020 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, which amounts to a B+. The Bengals are strong in this department, and they proved it yet again. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Also, make sure you follow me on socials. That's another great way to stay abreast of what's going on here on the Louie T Network. On Twitter, at Louie T Network, and on IG, Louie T Network _. All of those can be found down in the description of this video, along with the grading rubric for this breakdown. Want to know how the Bengals arrived at a 3.86? Down in the description is also the grading rubric that I use. So with that being said, don't forget to check out the Louie T Network podcast. Brand new episode up and available wherever platform or wherever you can get a podcast, whatever streaming platform you're on, the podcast is available there as well. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T. You guys have a good one. Take care. Stay safe. We'll reconvene at a later date and time. Have a good one.